my name is Michelle Ecker, and I am the Vice President of Student National Education Association, and we are partnered with the School of Teacher Education to provide KnightED Talks virtually this semester. We have a pre-recorded session today from Chelsea Pierce, which is a PhD student. So she sent us a PowerPoint, and I will go through the slides and you will hear her audio recording on each slide. If you have any questions, just wait till the end because my whole screen will be the PowerPoint, so I won't be able to see questions until the end.
Hello everyone, and welcome to our first session, Multisensory Approaches to Literacy Instruction. My name is Chelsea Pierce, and I'm a PhD student at UCF, studying special education. Our first step is determining what exactly multisensory literacy instruction is. So in order to fully take in all senses and use all senses to learn, we have to think about what our main senses are. So visual, so what we see, tactile, what we touch, kinesthetic, how we move, auditory, what we hear, and we also have a taste sense. Before we move forward with discussing specific strategies to use with your students and patients, let's consider the child's chronological versus developmental age. So that's just a really fancy way of saying chronologically, so from their birthday, how old are they, right? So let's look at this picture of the child on the right. Let's say chronologically he is 15 years old. And developmentally, where is he developmentally? So we can look in the area of speech and language, we can look at the area of comprehension, you can have an overall measure, but maybe this child is, or young adult or teenager, is at a chronological age of 15 years old, but at a developmental age of 7 or 8 years old. So as we think about what we are going to be teaching each student that we work with, we have to consider that there might be differences, and often are differences, between chronological and developmental age, especially when working with children with special needs. So let's think about some basic skills that a 15-year-old might be working on. A chronologically aged 15-year-old student. Well, they would certainly be working on more advanced math, and they might not be working on basic daily living skills when we're thinking of a neurotypical individual. So what should we be teaching a 15-year-old who can't read? Should we be teaching decoding? Should we focus on comprehension? Is it important to continue focusing on handwriting? Or can we start to have students use tablets or keyboards? I want you to think about that as we move forward, and we'll answer this, we'll wrap back around in a little bit. Make sure to incorporate movement in your lessons. Even if students are hospital bound or they need to stay in their bed, there are still different ways that we can encourage movement with literacy practices. Please take the time to check out these phonics links, and it shows you ways to incorporate movement into phonics instruction. For comprehension, definitely have students act it out in order to retell stories. Or you can take a piece of paper and either have a piece of paper at the head of their hospital bed and then towards their feet, Or if they are able to move around the room a little bit more, you might put a piece of chart paper on one wall and a piece of chart paper on the other, and they can move to answer questions that you have written on each chart paper or on each paper that's in their area. That way they're moving and they're not just in one spot. If you're thinking of a brain break or an opportunity for that student to get up, move around, sing or dance, or even just listen and watch, check out Go Noodle. GoNoodle.com is free. It has fantastic videos that are kid-friendly and many are educational. For word recognition, you can do Sight Word Twister if you have a child who's really able to be mobile. It just looks like a twister board, but inside of each circle color, you can write specific words, and then as the child recognizes the sight word, they put their hand on it to play twister. And then with air punctuation, I'm going to try my best to explain this verbally. So air punctuation would be that as a child is reading, they're looking out for specific punctuation. So for instance, if a sentence said, "There was a bee in the hive," and there's a period at the end of that sentence, every time the child sees a period, they're going to take their hand and put it out in front of them with their palm facing you. That way it looks kind of like a stop sign. Their hand out in front of them, because at the end of a sentence, we stop like a stop sign. So as I read, no matter what I'm reading, every single time I see a period at the end, I'm going to put my hand out like that stop sign. And that reminds them to pause for a moment because they're stopping. Another example would be if there was a comma. If there's a comma in your story, you're going to encourage your student to take their head and tilt it to the side, just like a comma is a little bit tilted to the side. That also reminds them to slow down when they see it. They're going to slow down, they're going to tilt their head to the side, and then they're going to keep reading. If you have questions about what this looks like, I'm more than happy to share that with you. Please feel free to reach out to me. It's really fun. Visual strategies can truly be adapted to meet the needs of the individual learner. So you'll see on the left, the color code highlighting strategy. They're finding WH questions, they're answering them, they're doing main idea and details, problem and solution, and they are highlighting all of this almost like a word search, but in their story. So that's a visual strategy because we're using some kind of color coding, and it helps the learner to really focus on those main points. And on the right, you'll see some other visual supports. A few different types of visual supports might come from a program called Boardmaker or Symbol Sticks, which is also supported through the same program called News to You, and another program called Lesson Picks. And these little visuals, which we'll talk about in our next presentation, have these little tiny squares with pictures that are really easy to understand for students that might face challenges with their receptive language. I'm really excited to share this resource with you. It's called News to You, and some different school systems already have a subscription to this curriculum and some of them do not. I know they do have a few resources on their website though, but I want to direct your attention to the right side of the screen. You'll notice that all three papers have the same title, Saturn Spacecraft, but they are leveled differently for each student. So you might have a small group where in an inclusive setting, for example, or you might be focusing just on one student and you pick what would be most appropriate for them. So we might pick something that every time it says NASA, there's a little tiny picture of a spacecraft, and we might pick something else that just mostly has text and just has one picture in it. But you'll see that it's leveled to meet the needs of each student and includes visuals. Here are some more examples of the resources available through News to You. and start thinking about how you could make something like this for your student, or how you might be able to adapt a story or something that you're sharing with your student, a narrative, how you could either make it look similar to this news to you format by incorporating images that go with each question, or you might be able to grab a couple freebies off the News to You website. Adapted activities are my favorite. So check out this adaptation on the left. So it starts with the book. This book is There Was an Old Lady Who Swallowed a Chick, which is based off There Was an Old Lady Who Swallowed a Fly. And what this person did, and this was the autismhelper.com. This resource, just so you know, is on Teachers Pay Teachers. But what this teacher did is they created a list of questions and included 3 options for visual supports that came with each question. So either you can laminate that sheet, cut out the little visuals, and use Velcro so that students can pull off which choice they choose and answer a question that way. Or they can take a pen or a crayon or a pencil and circle their answer. So it's like multiple choice, but using visual aids. And then also you'll notice they had each little item cut out that she swallowed, the old lady, and you can use those items while you're going through the story. Allow the student to give you one of those items to match in the book whenever that comes up. Let's talk about some fun ways to incorporate reading in your literacy sessions with your student or students. I would absolutely suggest that you order some children's comic books or children's graphic novels like the one on the right. Even if you have an early learner or a student who is still learning how to read, or a student, for example, who is an English language learner and maybe they have not acquired the English language yet, these are fantastic books for all learners because you're able to look at the faces of each character. You're able to look at their gestures and their facial expressions and what's going on around them and start having students tell you what's happening based on the pictures. And then, based on their interest, they will likely start to look at some of the words and pick it up slowly. But this is a great way to get students into what I like to call disguised reading. So they know they're having fun, they're interested in the pictures, they want to know what's happening. So it makes sense that they might try a little bit harder to find what's happening in the text. Remember that each student learns a little bit differently, so you may choose to try a highlighter strip or closed passages, which are just fill in the blank stories, to help students really focus on either what they're reading or what the question is asking. We can also combine strategies. So let's think about visual and tactile strategies all in one. You can use or create a felt or flannel board, and students can take the little items and move them around on the felt board as you go through each part of the story, or to explain their comprehension of the story as they're retelling. Or you can use a magnet board like the one shown on the right. Some students may use AAC devices or assistive technology in the home setting or in school. Make sure that if you think a child might have some limited verbal skills, you might ask their parent if they use any AAC or AT, which is assistive technology devices, like the ones we see here. The reading time communicator is a little bit more novel. They may not have seen that before, and you may not have seen this before, but it's very cool, so I wanted to share it with you. The child would turn each page of the book, and someone has already pre-recorded what is on each page, so they'll just click it and it will read it aloud to them. And on the right, you'll see there's some pictures on the tablet there, and that's a Tobii Dynavox is the name of that tablet, and the eye gaze is this extra piece, and it's on the bottom there, and when the child or the individual looks at the eye gaze, And at the screen, it will recognize where the child is looking and read it aloud or say the item so that he can make a choice independently. So, for example, I can say, tell me who the main character was in this story. And the child can look at these pictures that are in front of him, and based on where his eyes are moving, the device will say the name out loud that he's fixated his gaze on. Whenever you can, try your best to use sensory bins or other tactile strategies so that your students can really interact with what they're learning. So, for example, if you read a story about kids going to the beach, grab some kinetic sand, throw it in a bin, and bring it in for your student. Also, the same you can do, let's say you were doing an under the sea book. You could put some characters in the bin and let the students pull. You could ask them WH questions about specific characters in the story or which one was most similar. You can really have fun with it. These are the little beads that are water beads, and so they expand. Also, unfortunately, during this time with COVID and just germs that kids have in general, and especially in the hospital setting, all of these would have to be for individual kiddos. So you would probably have to make like little baggies of kinetic sand or little bags of any other materials like these sensory beads that the kids could have, because you don't want to and really can't reuse them. What are some other ways that we could make literature come to life? Well, just think about finger puppets. Either you could wear them or you could have your students wear them, especially if they are washable. You'll want to make sure of that. And you can act out the story or go through the specific parts. You can sequence the story by using the finger puppets. And also you can consider using something like an object board on the right. You can see this was adapted probably for a child with special needs. They have the book, which is the Very Hungry Caterpillar. They have visual supports, which are just the very plain images on the top with the word of each item. And they have 3D items that you can hold, which of course they're not real fruit, but the child can pull it off of that Velcro board that they have. And then they have what's called a switch. So the child can go ahead and press their hand down on the switch, which is on the right. You'll see it looks like a green circle, and it might read part of the story. So even if the child has limited verbal skills, they still have the opportunity to engage in interacting with the story. Children need ways to interact with the text that they're reading. So let's check out this book on the left. I have not yet found the name of it, but I will let you know as soon as I do. But let me quickly read to you what it says. It says, "Hey, I think I'm going to need some help. Can you use my scarf to make a bridge?" So then the child will take that piece of ribbon and then use it to create a bridge. And that shows that they're understanding what the directive was. And also what's happening in the story. So you can ask, for example, oh, what is the bunny going to do next? Looks like he's juggling apples. Now where is he going? And then the child on the right, he's reading a story, and I'm guessing it's about fishing because I see the fish there with the little, it almost looks like a leash, so that the child is able to pull it off with ease and pretend like they're fishing. Pop-up books are not just for early learners. So the book on the left you can see is counting from 1 to 10 using a holiday theme, but check out the book on the right. You can ask so many questions to engage your student, and if your child might face challenges with answering or asking questions, you can have them point as an answer, but check out that shark just popping out of the page with all of the informational text on the same page as well. Whenever you have a second, I would suggest that you look up the Expanding Expression tool. It is a specific program that would need to be purchased. However, of course, many teachers have been creative with it and have looked into making their own versions of this that meets their children's needs. I love this because if you look on the left and you see that thick rope, Each bead specifies something different. So the green would be a group, blue is do, the eye is what does it look like, the wood is what is it made of, pink signifies parts, white tells us where, and the question mark is what else do I know? This is a great tool for encouraging students to increase their utterances or to increase their description. So for example, I might say, I like fruit, or I like a tomato. Okay. What does it look like? What is it made of? What are the parts of a tomato? Where can I find a tomato? So you can really just expand as students take each little bead and move it over or move it up or down based on if they have answered that question. Regardless of the specific curriculum that a child's home school uses, you'll want to familiarize yourself with different methods. So if you look in the middle, this is from a program called the Barton method. But also let's look at how some people have made adjustments to it. So look on the left with word families and on the right with segmentation. How cool is this that you can have children playing with blocks and they're still working on their segmentation, their phonics, their sight words. Think about how you can incorporate learning and play. If your students are having trouble with reading or writing, I have a fun tool for you and something that you may not have known before. Children are awesome at telling stories. All right, you may have known that part, but maybe you didn't realize that when students tell stories and retell stories, maybe ones that you've told them, they're actually learning sequencing, story grammar. So story grammar is like what happened in the story, the setting, the characters. They're learning all of that as they're putting together their own stories. So please ensure that you are giving students adequate time to create their own stories if possible, or listen to you tell or create stories and allow them to retell. On the bottom of the slide, I've included a link to the Language Dynamics Group website. I had the incredible privilege of working with the creator of a program called Story Champs, and it is a program that you would need to purchase. However, they have tons of videos that are free, and I wish I would have seen them before I was even in the classroom working with students, because it just truly describes the magic of storytelling. Once you have an opportunity to check out the Language Dynamics website, especially focusing on Story Champs, this will make a little bit more sense to you. However, I wanted to show you the little images, the little visuals under each picture. So you see the child with the green helmet, and under each picture you'll see a corresponding element of story grammar or story structure features. So you'll see in the first one, in the purple one, it's a little character. Then you see the child appears to be falling over a rock, and you see a thumbs down, that's the problem. Then you see a blue heart, or a heart with the blue on the background, and you see that that's his feeling. He feels sad. And the next one is the falling action, or what's going to happen after. You see he's getting a Band-Aid. And then all of a sudden at the end, you see he's fine, and he's standing, and he's ready to go. So that's the thumbs up. So you would start teaching a story with all of those paired, and then you would eventually fade the visuals. So first you would model the story, use gestures, retell as a group if you do have a small group, or just with your student. Auditory supports are so critically important. Imagine the difference between me telling you there was a parade going down the street when suddenly it started raining and everyone ran inside. So I can tell you that, and you might be trying to imagine what it looks like. But if I had music in the background of maybe a parade and you could hear a lot of people, and then all of a sudden you heard thunder and maybe people screaming, or they had louder voices as they were running inside. That really brings the image that you have in your head to life just by adding those auditory supports. So let's start on this yellow box at the top. So consider the environmental sounds in the stories. So is there a band playing? Are there cobblestone streets? Is it storming? You can have these clips available on your phone. You can have them available, you can grab them through YouTube. There are other sound effect generators. Let's move to the blue part in the middle. Encourage students to play a part and have a role in creating the sounds. So maybe they press the button, or maybe you create a rain stick with them. Maybe you're talking about the jungle or even a band, and then it's their turn to move their rain stick or to ring a bell. Or maybe we talked about switches briefly, where a child can push down and it might say a sound. So maybe they press a switch, or they might have a peer or somebody else read it aloud, or you might have another child pre-record the text. So if the child who is listening might have some challenges with reading, they can hear their peer telling the story. All right, and finally moving to the green part is that we want to ensure that we're supporting all students, including students with limited language and some communication challenges. So again, we're going to talk a little bit more about switches in one of our other presentations, but switches are just where the child can press down and a sound will be pre-recorded for them so that they have the option to take part in the telling of the story. So for example, you might want to use repetitive, predictable text, like chicka chicka boom boom, or brown bear, what do you see? Because if you have chicka chicka boom boom pre-recorded, and every time that child pushes their switch, it literally says chicka chicka boom boom, they can press that switch every single page, and they are adding in that part, which gives them a voice even if they're not verbally speaking. Some books already come with pre-recorded sounds, which is fantastic because that enhances the students' participation because they'll be able to press, and also they can have a better mental image of what's happening in the story and the sounds that accompany it. If you're looking at the Eric Carle book on the left, you might be thinking, that's not so appropriate for our older kiddos. It's totally fine. Look at the Welcome to the Symphony in the middle, where it talks about the symphony, the orchestra, and all of the instruments that go with it. That would certainly be more age appropriate for an older child. So we don't have to completely rule out a specific type of book like the pop-up book or the sound book. We just have to find one that meets our students' needs. Here are some extra reading aids for you to consider when working with students who might face challenges with reading. So the C Pen on the left is a little bit fancier, and for older students, it can translate, and basically you just run it over the text and it will also read it aloud to you. The leapfrog in the middle you might already be familiar with. They take the pen and they push it to the page and it will read it for them. And also hot dots on the right. I really enjoy hot dots because students can answer multiple choice questions and have them read aloud. With increased advocacy for individuals with disabilities and for universal design for learning, companies like Apple are really amping up their accessibility features. If you click on this big colorful apple, it will take you to the Apple website, especially so that you can focus on accessibility features like a magnifier, voiceover, switch control, or a screen that speaks. Microsoft is also doing an incredible job at ensuring that their products are accessible to all individuals. So feel free to click on the little Windows logo and it will take you to Microsoft's accessibility website. I wanted to highlight some really great features such as Microsoft Edge, Narrator, the ability to change and adjust contrast, and immersive learning tools. Check it out. Please check out these websites at your convenience. And I also just want to share with you some information that you may already know or you might not know regarding accommodations for standardized testing in Florida. So when students take a reading-based assessment, they cannot have the reading portion read aloud to them because it's assessing reading. However, if they have a math portion, for example, like math word problems, that can be read to them if they do have that accommodation, for example, on their IEP. And that's because that math section is not assessing reading, it's assessing math. Just a fun fact. Here are some additional resources for you to check out. Just a friendly reminder that the photos from this presentation were gathered from various websites and they are not my property. Please do not replicate any photos or slides without proper permission and citation. Also, this was created just for you all at Nemours Children's Hospital to share with the student teachers, and it is solely intended for educational purposes. Thank you. It's truly been my pleasure sharing this information with you, and I'm happy to speak with you at any time through email. You can email me at chelsea2009@knights.ucf.edu. Thank you so much.